All right, we are rolling. Tim Matz, welcome to the Terrain Theory Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Tim, it's a pleasure to have you on. I've been following you for a minute. I have to say I'm a big fan of everything that you're putting out into the world. You've shaped a lot of the ways that I now exercise and train and move through my day. And I'm really excited to get to know you and also learn a little bit more about your process, your philosophy, and your journey. But to kick things off, I want to know, what does it mean to move like human?
Yeah, my wife came up with that handle, so which I thought was pretty clever because I mean, it's twofold. There is, in my opinion, a blueprint, so to speak, like a biological blueprint for how humans, well, have been shaped by the environment and thus motivated to move through the landscape. And so I think that has informed how I want to train. I want to train with enough specificity towards real life that I'm prepared for that. And so that's one aspect. And I think another aspect is that it's kind of like how to move through the world like a human, like how to get back to being human. Because I feel like we've been so far removed from our habitat, essentially. And so a big part of my whole message is moving back towards our habitat, which is nature, which we're not separate from. And yeah, learning to be back in relationship with the elements and as close to our habitat as we can get. And obviously that takes some tact in light of the world that we've inherited. But a big part of that includes moving back towards each other, which I think is maybe the most important part of what I have to offer is like the aspect or the idea of revillaging, like moving back into sharing the load, so to speak, of, when you live close to nature, you try to live close to nature, you have to do lots of stuff for yourself. And it's hard and it requires a village, so to speak. And especially when it comes to raising kids, which is very important to me. I feel like I have a lot of support compared to most people in the world. Like we live amongst a number of families we've known for a long time. We all co-parent each other's kids, and I still feel under-resourced. And so I feel like we really, really need each other. And I love this planet. Like this planet, the closer I move towards nature and outside of, maybe you call it modernity or something, like the more I just feel so much love for this planet that I want to protect it. I want to preserve the wild places that give me a sense of place and home. And so moving like a human, in my opinion, is just getting back to our natural selves the best we can in light of the cards we've been dealt.
Do you think it's possible to do that living in an urban environment?
I think so, to some degree. I think even just simply getting outside more and just getting like full spectrum light on your eyes and on your skin. It's tough. And I don't actually have the answers for that. I think we're in a bit of a conundrum because I don't think that we actually don't get to choose what our biology requires, right? Like we need nature on some level, and we see that people are suffering from not having exposure to nature. And we know that we all, at least you guys know, like we are dependent on the sun and light cycles and all this stuff. And our culture at large is growing more and more sick and disconnected from the planet and from each other, from themselves. And so, but I do think that revillaging can happen on some level, even in like a suburban environment. I think it's just, the internet has us so polarized and so afraid of each other. But like you go to your local co-op and you're like, oh, there's Jerry, or there's like, look at all these nice people. Like it's actually not as insane as I think it's portrayed. Obviously, there's plenty of insanity happening at high levels and then in little pockets. But like, yeah, like I think yes, you can step towards your neighbor. Like you can know your neighbors, you can know the people on your street, you can make things, you can trade things, you can organize potlucks, you can share food together, you can harvest your own food and share it together. And I think that breeds an intimacy that's really needed and absent in the human experience today. And we see it because, like, you go out and you're like, and I know I have this in myself, that feeling that like I need to like kind of look over my shoulder when I'm out in the world. And I think I acquired that at a young age just from living a certain lifestyle. Um, but I still have it. I mean, I know people have that too. I can see it on people's faces and stuff like that. But I think that we can step towards each other slowly, and re-village on some level. You don't have to be off grid in the woods, in my opinion. And you don't have to be off grid in the woods to train like I train or anything like that. I think it's all whatever you can do slowly.
I
Yeah,
also like that as you include the human as part of nature, it seems like something I hadn't thought before, but spending time with people is akin to spending time in nature if people are nature.
Yeah.
So thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that like the more that we can realize like our body is nature, like it's literally born from the tissues of the planet and we are the elements and it's so linked up with all the cycles of the planet. And when you start to really feel that, you can start to really take care of yourself. And then once you have that level of self-love and connection to your body as part of the planet, then you're a little more equipped to care for others and care for the planet. But like, it's like we have to put our own oxygen mask on first. So I'm really big on like, you have your body. It's like the lowest hanging fruit. And especially in a world where it seems like we don't have much choice and so much stuff, so much injustice and so many things. We look and we're just like, how could this be happening? But I can get up right now and I can do some lunges. I can do that right now. We can all just get up and that's going to have such an immense, like it's just like the greatest physical, it's like the greatest health intervention we have. And it's just like right there. Even if you're in a wheelchair, I'd say that you can still do something. And
mhm.
that's sovereignty, in my opinion. It's like, what can you do? Like I'm reading this book right now, just started it called like the 15 principles of conscious leadership or something. I'm actually really liking it. And like three of the things that they're talking about, it's co-written by a few people. It's like, is life happening to you, by you, or through you being like even like a bigger picture perspective, like you're connected to that which is beyond the personality, something bigger. And I'm trying to just maintain that perspective because I suffer from the same existential stuff that everybody else does. I feel pretty empowered in my life, but like, I have my own mortality to face. I have 3 boys to keep alive. I have whatever supposed impending doom is coming my way that the internet's telling me about. It's like, it's totally insane, right? But like, what can I do? What can I do? Like, I can choose if I'm going to put something toxic in my body or not. I can choose that. I can choose if I'm going to get up and move my body today or if I'm going to sit around on my phone. So it's like, I'm like, what are the lowest hanging fruits? And luckily, the lowest hanging fruits are mostly free and have the greatest impact on our health.
Yeah, amen to that. So let's start at sort of more at the beginning. Tell us what were the steps and the milestones on your journey to becoming who and what you are now.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Southern California playing baseball and grew into a very disenchanted youth by about like 16 years old, 17 years old. Um, I started reading Howard Zinn and Noam Chomsky and was like 9/11 happened and I had so many questions. I was so confused on what I was taught in school around history. Like Howard Zinn flipped my world completely upside down, essentially. And and for people who don't know who Howard Zinn is, like he's essentially a historian who gives the perspective of the underdog's experience of the unfolding of nature and power and stuff like this. And so I had so many questions, and I found it's very nihilistic. I found I didn't understand all the injustice in the world. I found rock and roll music, hardcore music, and that kind of that became my sanctuary. I got into the animal rights movement because everybody in that movement was militant vegans. And um, I grew a lot there and established some things that I still carry today. But I was destroying myself. I had a bad alcohol problem. I had a bad violence problem. And my friends were dying, committing suicide, going to jail. It was really, really rough time. And there was some sort of grace that kept me alive. Like I seemed to kind of skirt past any major things other than just like the slow degradation of my physiology through substance abuse and negative thoughts and all that stuff, depression, darkness, essentially. And I was working at a vegan restaurant, and there was this one guy who worked there, still one of my best friends today. He actually lives out in Southern Oregon, kind of near me. And he was so interesting. He wasn't eating the food, for one, and we got free food there. And I was like, what's up with this guy? And all these people were having, we're at a vegan restaurant. We're a bunch of vegans. We're like having these highly heated debates on animal rights and life and all this stuff. And people are debating with him, but he's just like cool. Like he's not knee jerk reacting to anything. He's just like cool, calm, and collected, and able to take the heat and just like respond. And I was like, this guy is so interesting. And his name is Prema. And I ended up just like kind of wanting to be around him. I ended up hanging around with him a lot. And he taught me about fasting. And it was like I got into fasting and sleeping outside under the stars. He introduced me to mindfulness practice. It was the first time I got into actual like internal cultivation practices, which are a huge part of my life. And we'll get into that in a minute here. But he saved my life, essentially. Like I was had blood, like I was coughing up blood and stuff like this. Like I was really, really unwell. And I basically did like a 180 overnight. Like I left the rock and roll scene. I left my friends, and I just started hanging out with Prema, who was going by Eddie at that time. And he moved into my house. We just spent our time fasting, eating herbs, being outside, doing breathing practices at night under the stars, and it was just, he really was an amazing mirror for me to take a major turn in my life. And so I'll always give it up to him on all these podcasts I do. And from there, I fell in love with practice. And at the same time, I was attempting to go to junior college over so many years. And I took this peace studies course. And in that peace studies course, I read Thich Nhat Hanh's Peace is Every Step. And that book like hit me over the head and just flipped my world upside down. It was the first time I had an actual direct experience of myself in consciousness. So simple, but like beyond my thinking mind. And I remember exactly where I was sitting in my parents' house and just being like, oh, like, oh, that's why these Buddhist practitioners are so at ease with nothing and just in the simplicity of being. I was like, okay, I got a taste for it. It didn't last, because it doesn't work that well. It doesn't work that way. I didn't have ultimate enlightenment ongoing from there on, but I got a taste of it. And I was basically just like, I love practice. And so that kind of took me down a path of studying all sorts of different Eastern traditions and esoteric practices and all this stuff around internal cultivation. And I just loved it. I just took to it. And it took me down a very I became a hermit, essentially. I just lived, I did my practice. I worked at a co-op, stopped eating all the like fried vegan food and stuff, just like Prema, and got out of that whole thing. Started like introducing like raw, local, grass-fed dairy and stuff back in my diet. It was like, oh my God, I was like, felt so much better. I got nutrified. And was just doing my practice. And eventually it led me to my teacher, who I never know about how to really talk about him or them, because it was him and his wife, where I moved out to Southern Colorado to go study with them and to be with them. And I ended up living on retreat for 6 years. And in that, it was a school of practice that wasn't affiliated with any particular sect or tradition. It was just about the love of consciousness and practice and a love for the world. So that's what I loved about their teachings. It was like, we called it the school of embrace, not the school of escape. Like you see in a lot of traditions where it's like, oh, the body's a burden, I need to escape into consciousness. It was like, no, actually, this is heaven manifest here. We can know ourselves beyond the personality and connect to that transcendent quality of our being, but we can also embody fully here and take responsibility for this planet. And so I spent 6 years on retreat there, learning all sorts of practice and spending thousands of hours in practice. And that really shaped me. I really feel like I grew up there. I think like a lot of us men and people in general, like we don't have an intact culture, right? We're like cultural orphans, and we don't go through any real initiatory process. So I found my initiation on the street, so to speak, in some destructive way that like brought me through some sort of dark night of the soul. But it was here that I actually grew up big time. Like my female teacher, she basically forged me. She like ran me into the ground. It was the first time I learned to be physical, first time I learned to like move my energy in a real way, in a way that from the outside looking in, you'd be like, oh, that's really cruel. You can't treat someone like that. But it was like a left-hand path that was like, she was breaking me down. And I could have left if I wanted. I could have. But it was shaping me in a good way. And so I grew up, and it was there that the love for like multidisciplinary movement, like my teacher, my male teacher, like he loved all sorts of practice. Like it was like martial arts stances, Kundalini yoga, Taoist practices, like all the stuff. We rode horses as a practice. That's where I got into horses, because I also trim horses' hooves is one thing I do on the side. And so it was this like, it was a tantric school essentially. So it was like embracing everything as practice. And I just fell in love with so much practice and so much movement. And he was very physical. We were really about like moving our energy and the whole physical side of training as a means to know ourselves beyond the personality. So it's a means of self-cultivation, not just for muscles. That was not even we could give a shit about muscles. It was just about knowing ourselves and having clarity. It was really about like cultivating clarity in a world that has so much muck, like just the need to cut through so much of the dross, just to be aware and be able to pay attention. So I fell in love with all sorts of practice there. I left the retreat after 6 years, still stayed where I was living. And I started training with Ido Portal and his school of practice. I don't know if you know who Ido Portal is. Do you know who Ido Portal is?
Yeah, I've heard that name.
Yeah, he's an amazing practitioner. He really brought to the movement world, like the movement culture, like a generalist approach to movement. He brought the quality of like training for anti-fragility. And he's a phenomenal mover. Like, look up some of his videos. Like, I'm not sure he trains that same way anymore, but he's just a really beautiful person, a self-cultivation aspect, like perspective on movement. And I love that. So I learned a lot in his camp. I trained with them at a distance for 6 months. I had no money, but I wanted to train with him. I had to drive 5 hours to get to a bank. So I only had a little credit union here. I spent all my savings to work with them. They're out in Israel. It was like this whole thing. And, but I learned so much from that school, and still use a lot of it in how I work with people around programming for people. But yeah, so like I was practicing hand balancing and gymnastics ring strength and ground locomotion and all that stuff. And as you can see, that stuff still informs how I practice today. And then I was just like, I just couldn't get enough. So it's like whatever, I was just going to all sorts of different camps. I went to the MoveNat camp, like Erwan Lacour and MoveNat. I love that. Like I went through their trainings. I went through the one level up to level 2, and just love that. Like I saw him training out in the woods, and I was like, that's it. Like, that's it. Like he's carrying logs around the woods. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to be like Erwan. And so hugely inspired by Erwan and that whole school. And then I just got into all sorts of different stuff, like all sorts of different schools of practice. And then eventually, like as of late, I went through, I got injured trimming horses really bad about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now. And I, I learned so much through that injury. And I think it enlightened me on injury and practice in so many different ways. But specifically, it was like the effect that the nervous system and emotions have on our physiology when we go through an injury, and our mindset and everything. And when you're trimming horses, it's intense, and like when you're trimming horses that are not cooperative, it's really intense. And when you're trimming horses that aren't cooperative with a horse owner that you can't really find the ability to respect because they don't work with the horses and are putting you in danger. And obviously that's a bit of a victim view on that. Like I didn't have to do the work, but I did. And I just got messed up one time trimming, and it was a hyper emotional experience. I was frustrated with the horses, frustrated with her. And it just locked me into like a holding pattern in my lumbar sacral junction. And like, I couldn't tie my shoes for like a year.
Wow.
And I was really depressed. And because I was a movement guy, like I had been training people for 10 years up until that happened. I couldn't fix myself. And so I got like a huge slice of humble pie. But that eventually led me through functional patterns for a little bit. I really liked certain questions they were asking about movement around like, how did the human animal evolve to move, to mostly be a upright walking mammal that throws and contralaterally reciprocates. And I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so I've definitely adopted certain things from their camp and thrown a lot of that camp out as well. But it eventually led me to the nervous system training through a camp called MoveMed. Nate and Benjamin, they helped me out. I went through their coaching certification and like just completely flipped the script on my approach to like what's really foundational for the human animal, like when it comes to training in light of the modern world, right? Because I think like the nervous system and the way we move, like before it was just like nature, you were just a part of nature. There was no separation, and your need for resources, protecting your family, whatever it was, all of that just dictated how you moved. We were shaped by the environment. But now we live in zoos essentially, and we have to piece together this. We have to like add in all the elements, and to try and give us all that level, all those inputs that we still need on a biological level, like on a DNA level, we still need all that stuff. And so the nervous system stuff is huge because like, historically we spent all our time outside, like taking in the world peripherally, like not living in a high stress state where we're hyper focused on our computer and like all this stuff, like we're so hyper flexed and contracted, and the stuff we're getting while we're stuck in flexion is like, it's so intense, and we're like, we can't handle the inputs. And so we get more and more tense, and that affects, look at me right now, like my rib cage, my head is forward, like it's affecting my respiratory mechanics, which has a whole feedback loop on our nervous system, on our sense of safety, on our ability to handle all the inputs from our environment, and us to be able to remain in a reflexive state where we can just respond to the environment like an animal, right? It's like a cat isn't, calculating the degree of its pelvis before it jumps and, how am I hinged properly? And it's not doing that. It's just responding to the environment, right? And so we've lost that like reflexive state of nervous system adaptation where we can just like trust our bodies and move. And now people are so scared, which I think is like the best feedback I get from people I work with is like they regain the ability to actually just trust their body to move through space and not be like, oh, there's that thing on the ground. Am I going to hurt my back again? Am I hinged properly? Do I need to brace and pressurize? Like all that is so neurotic, right? Like I think that movement, like breathing, it's supposed to be an autonomic behavior. Like you see it as like a monkey or a cat just responding. And I've noticed that since I've implemented that training and I've supported that as a foundational program for the people I work with, they start to move closer to that ability to be at ease, confident, and able just to respond to the environment without having to be neurotic about how they're moving. And so this stuff got me out of pain, and nothing was working. I had tried every mobility camp, every, functional patterns, couldn't fix me. None of this stuff could fix me. And I was desperate. And it really came down to like, oh, I was actually just stuck. Like my nervous system was stuck and the tissue was just holding. I actually wasn't injured anymore. Like I didn't have a slipped disc. I didn't have anything going on. I didn't have a tear, nothing. I was just like stuck in this pattern. I was frozen. It was like I was stuck in fight or flight. And so I had to down-regulate my nervous system, and do these practices that just repressurized my torso, grew my rib cage, got me in a better stack, and it just melted away. And I was like, wow, like the body really can heal. And in my opinion, all those practices they're just supplements of what you would normally get when you are in nature. And that's what we're doing, right? Like we see all this biohacking and all this stuff. It's just an approximation of, we're just trying to bring nature into our living room. Like I'm in here and my sister-in-law's and there's plants and, we got low blue lights, and it's like, all of it's just like, we're just trying to mimic nature because we still need it no matter what. And, so now I'm just, I train people in person and train people online. And I've been trying to find a way that feels like in integrity to me to work with people online, because I see so much gatekeeping around movement and so much information that it's overwhelming for people. And I see a lot of people with a lot of attention on their channels charging a lot of money for coaching. And I'm just like, it doesn't feel good to me. I feel like what we need is a healthy population to turn this ship around, so to speak. And how are we going to do that if people got to spend $500 to $1,000 to learn how to take care of their body every month? Like we need to, I feel like the people like me who have a lot of attention on them, like we need to make accessible and affordable coaching to people. We need to educate the population at large on how to tend to their body, because it is the greatest, one of the greatest single interventions we have for our health. It's like you can just you can just like rest at ease on so many things if you're just strong, your tissues are mobile, your nervous system is regulated. Like I just want to provide that to people, as many people as possible. And I want to give it away, and I feel like as I get older, I'm approaching 40, like I've learned stuff. I still have so much to learn. I want to just give it away. Like I'm lucky to have a few elders in my life. And like, I love that maturation that I see in elders. Like that's like what we have to do, right? To keep this going for the future generations. Like we have to give it away. We can't just like lock it up for a monetary gain. Like it makes me it disgusts me. And so a big thing of what I've been doing is like, I'm just like, nah, I'm just going to make it like hella affordable. I'm just going to make it like everybody's got these high ticket coaching. Like, nah, fuck that. I just want to I want to make it as accessible and do it in a good way. That's the only way I feel good about it. And, it should be like, we should be taught this stuff when we're in school as kids, and, I don't have to teach my boys anything about movement. Like they're ninjas, like especially Quill, like our oldest boy, I'm astonished watching him all the time. And, and it freaks me out because I still have I didn't get into taking care of myself or wasn't raised in a primal way or anything like that. And I'm like, I'm very afraid of heights. Like I'm very afraid of heights. I'll still get on a roof for a friend and put a roof on with him. And I'm mortified while I'm doing it. It doesn't go away. I don't know if it ever will, but like to watch he's so unencumbered. Like he has no fear about it. He's so confident and he's so like he'll climb any tree. He's 7 years old. Doesn't have to have limbs. He will find a way to climb it like a bear, like his grip strength, his physique. Like he'll walk like on a branch like this, like just do out, like no hands on anything. And he just doesn't even think twice. He's like as close to a cat as I've seen, and that's just because of the environment. I've just we've just put him in an environment where that just happens naturally. He's just that's it. That's the innate, like that's the intrinsic human movement, right? Like it's just,
Yeah,
and
he
so
sounds like
yeah,
he's unencumbered by the adaptive demands of like the modern society, which just sort of breaks us and, as you said, rounds us and shrinks us.
totally. Like go sit inside under fluorescent lights for 8 hours a day, and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's I notice this about you, that on your, on your, in your social presence, which is where I first came upon you, you do give away a lot for free there. You are giving away a lot of your knowledge and wisdom and movements and philosophies there for free. That's one of the things that I think immediately sets you apart from the gatekeepers that you will also see. And two of the other things that immediately drew me to your work was, one, you're always doing your movements and your practices outside. I think just about I don't think I've ever seen you in a video do any of your movements inside. So you found a way to create a training environment in your outdoors that serves you, and then a lot of your movements, to me anyway, are unconventional or seem fairly unconventional. And I'd love to talk about like those two aspects of your training and your approach to training and practice.
yeah. Well, again, like I'm always trying to view how I live based on how humans have lived for a 99% of our time on the planet. And so, like, in my opinion, and based on my experience of how I feel healthy and vital and pain free and highly energized, um, it's really about getting back to how we lived. And like we spent all our time outside at some point, like a long, not that long ago, but for a very long time, we lived outside exclusively. And I'm not an expert on circadian biology, but I've studied it enough and I've applied the principles. And I've never felt more at home and more energized, more healthy, more vital since I've just decided to spend as much time outside as I possibly can. And that doesn't mean just sitting under the sun for 8 to 10 hours a day. Like I'm obviously have common sense around too much sun. Like there's obviously have too much of anything. And some people are always getting on me about that. They're just like, can't be out in the sun all day. I'm like, I'm not. I'm just saying you need the sun. You still need the sun. And obviously don't be dumb. And so yeah, just like the connection to the earth, being outside, I just feel like I want to be that I feel more at home when I'm outside. Just simple as that. I want my kids to feel at home on this planet. And I feel like, if you went into a room with 1,000 people that you didn't know, you would feel isolated. You wouldn't feel very at home in that room. But when you walk into a space and you know all the beings around you, like, oh, that's cottonwood. Oh, that's aspen. Oh, that's rabbit brush. Oh, I can do these things with that. Now you're like, you have a sense of place. Like I can go outside and I know the plants around me. I know the animals. Maybe some of them are actually the same animals I see often, like some deer that live within a mile range and they come and circle through. And I'm like, oh, and I've seen that little buck. He's growing, and now I'm at home on the planet. And when you're at home on the planet, you want to protect the planet. Like you're connected, you love you love it, you have a sense of place. And I feel like we really need to find that sense of belonging on this planet if we're going to have the motivation and the whereabouts to actually stand up for protecting the wilderness and protecting these places that give us that sense of home. Like you take all the plants out of this place and replace it with skyscrapers and you like, what's going to happen? It can't happen. I'll do everything I can to make sure it doesn't happen as long as I'm here, so being outside and training crosses so many things off the list of what I need to do to be living as natural as possible and feel at home and be as healthy as I can. Like I'm grounding, I'm getting light in my eyes and on my body, all the various stages of the light exposure and all the benefits that each of those wavelengths bring. I get that. I'm getting to move. I'm getting to like I'm getting heightened sensory awareness, which makes me just feel more alive as well. I got my feet on the ground. I'm getting feedback. I've got insects that I can work to remain calm as I work out amongst. I've got, it's hot, it's cold, like it's about cultivating resiliency, outside of just like, yeah, cultivating real resiliency, in my opinion, like where you're really, really adaptable. And I want to be comfortable in nature, and it takes some time. It takes some time. Like, you go outside, you've had your muck boots on all winter, right? And then it's springtime, and you're like walking out on the gravel. It's like, even for me, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Like I lost my hooves. I got to get my hooves back, and so, and that takes not that long. But people don't put themselves through that little window of like, oh, it's tender, like that's okay. You're growing, like you can embrace that discomfort and be like, oh wow, I'm really cold right now. But you know what? Like you're not going to be as cold like next week because you've been out here a bit. And so I'm really big on just feeling at home and resilient. And I just love being outside, and I think like if you're lucky enough to come upon some sort of path that gives you the ability to recognize the nature of your mind, realize that you're not your thoughts, and to be able to really pay attention and be present, that's magical no matter where you're at. That's where you can be having a spiritual experience on an airplane, right? But you have that when you're out in your natural environment and you're living, all of a sudden you're in this epic unfolding, like this orchestra, it's like the light, the animals, the insects, the aspens turning orange and flickering like this, it's like all of a sudden you're having this unbelievable, magical, beautiful experience. And I just think that if we can do that, we'll take care of each other more. We'll care for this place more. And all the stuff like borders and like mandates, all these, like none of any of it matters or makes sense once you're like living in that space. And if you're living in that space with people that you truly love and care about, and you get to share love and grief with each other, and you get to go through the ups and downs and have that intimacy that is so needed and intrinsic to the social animal that we are, then life is actually really good, and it's worth fighting for. It's worth living. And so I hope that is what I inspire in people, is like to move in that direction. And I don't talk about my practice, my internal practice or anything like that online, really, because it's my teacher was always like, your practice is secret, like I mean, I don't know about you, but like, I don't like when people are like talking about their spiritual powers or their abilities and all this and that. Like, it's a slippery slope when you're playing with power like that. And I'm like, I'd rather just be completely unassuming, actually still think that I'm a rocker. That's like, like I like being unassuming, and obviously hard to be unassuming when you have a black arm and all this and that. But I love, I hope that people can find that sense of connection on this planet, and I'm hoping to inspire that in people.
Tim, are athletics a part of your life these days? You mentioned you were a baseball player when you were younger. Do you still play any sports?
Every now and then, like once a year, something, we'll have like a pickup volleyball game on the land or at the like in town or something like that. Or actually, like we went paintballing, which is highly athletic, which is insane. I paintballed when I was a kid, and it's like I was so scared. When I was growing up, I was like a late bloomer, and I was really slow. I was really scrawny, and like had all these big friends, and I was always scared to paintball. But as like a friend was getting married, and his like bachelor party deal, he was going to have we went paintballing. And so me and all these like almost 40-year-old guys were going out to paintball, and you get there and it's like, you see all these guys who like clearly train to paintball all the time. They're in like full gear, and they're like, they got like badges, team badges. And we're like, oh shit, like what are we getting into? But like, I was like, finally, this is the stage of my life where I have the confidence and willingness to go to battle. And so like I went out there and ripped so hard. I was so sore. I couldn't like wipe my ass or walk for like a week. I was so running and like sliding and like willing to run in and get shot point blank. And like, it was so fun. So that was like the spontaneous athletic. That's one spontaneous athletic thing. But mostly I'm like, I don't really train sports, but I think that's great if people want to. I think that like, I still have the like crazy abilities from playing baseball for so many years, like just the vision, like I have amazing vision, amazing reactions. And I'm really glad about that. But, like my feet are all messed up from wearing cleats for so many years. So I'm always working to regain my foot function, which affects so many things upstream. So I'm really big on that with working with myself and people. But sports are cool. I like sports.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
me and my family and my friends started playing pickup baseball, not as often
Mm.
as we'd like, but and it's just the best. No one's at a stadium, no one's wearing home and away uniforms, so we're just playing baseball, and it gets some of my I'm a musician, is like I try to get some of my musician buddies to come. Oh, you don't want me on your baseball team, and it's like I absolutely want you on my baseball team, and once people cross that line and realize that there's nothing at stake other than having a great time, and again, people are in their bodies. I see like people run down the first baseline that I haven't maybe ever seen run in our entire relationship, And so I feel like it's a good gateway to get some sedentary types, like just moving a little bit. At least that's been my strategy. I started playing hockey again, um, just last year after like a 9-year break, and sort of interesting because I'm now 48. I'm a little bit older than you, but also like that, an adult, like a solidly in adulthood. And when I quit the first time, I was pretty scared. I got pretty freaked out. I had several concussions, and I thought like, oh, now I'm old, and it's time to hang them up. And this is a young man's sport. But I gained enough wisdom, partly like through doing this podcast and being
Mm.
so emboldened by the wisdom I've gleaned from so many of these amazing conversations, to realize, just get your shit together, not just physically, but mentally. Like it'll
Mm.
release the fear
Mm.
and then excel. And I'm having more fun. I'm playing way better. Um, and are there still like young hot shots that are going to wheel and deal? Certainly. But like a lot of it was mental for me, and realizing that the victim mentality was the reason I was getting hurt, actually.
Mm.
So sports has really filled the gap for the movement part of my life. Again, I'm so grateful because it was such a huge part of my life when I was young, and I can be a little bit stubborn about having a movement routine. I do like these days have my morning sort of stretching and yoga routine, but I'm one of those guys that's like I'm not going to go for a jog, but I'll play fucking 8 hours of hockey straight and without
Yeah.
even blinking. It's just sort of how I'm
Yeah.
wired. So that's been
I
my
think
my approach to it.
I love that, dude. I think I mean, sports provides so like if you can do, obviously there's the chance like as we get older we get all like we're like yeah let's go, and then we like overdo it and go outside of our threshold, and then we're injured and then we don't recover the same way as when we were 20 years old. But if you can do it in a good way, like that's anti-fragility training in my opinion, because you never take the same step twice, and you're training that reflexive ability, like where you have to respond to your environment. I mean, it's effect on your brain, your cardiovascular system, because you're working, right? Like sports are definitely high demand on the respiratory system and cardiovascular system. So yeah, man, I think that's great. Yeah, I actually did, and I don't know why I didn't think about this when you said do you play sports, but I did play a couple. They weren't pickup games of baseball, but we were just batting practice. Like me and my landmate, who's also a musician, who grew up playing baseball, and we go out to the local field, um, and there's an L screen there, and we got a bucket of balls, and we just throw each other batting practice. And other people have been slowly coming. We've done it a couple times, and just like have a wooden bat and just be like crack a ball, and just like being out in the outfield and moving around and throwing. This is so nice.
It's the best. Yeah, I've
So
also
good.
found with sports, there's this thing called flow state that gets tossed around, and the
Mm.
only time I've ever experienced something I would call a flow state is when I'm playing really hockey, when I'm deep in it and my
Mm.
mind is not in the picture at all. I'm just purely moving and making the plays, and as if there's another power in charge of my body. And I look, after the play, I look back like how did that just happen? What just happened out there? And it's incredible.
Love it.
Yeah.
Tim, at this point, you've worked with, I'm sure a number of clients from across the country, if not the planet. And I'm curious to know, do you start to notice like commonalities in terms of uh, fundamentals that are missing in the clients that come to you that you have to address first? Like, do you have just common first steps, or you can look at these people that come to you and you go, I know exactly what's been missing in their life movement wise that we're going to address immediately?
Yeah, I mean, I think like obviously we're attracting things all the time in the universe, right? So it's like I'm portraying a certain message, I'm talking about a certain thing, it relates to my own story. And so I mean, a lot of the people that come to me are afraid to move because they've been in chronic pain. And so, what's unique is that like what you see me doing often, like where I'm at right now in my training, you see me swinging like 45-pound club and like, 32 or plus kilogram kettlebells and stuff like this, or doing a muscle up and stuff like that. Like, that's not how I'm training people. Actually, most of the people I work with are doing like horizontal force vectors, like resistance training that's really safe and approachable to like anybody wherever they're at. And then we're working on those foundations of midline health. So from the palate to the pelvic floor, respiratory mechanics, the rib cage, the nervous system, internal pressurization of the torso. Like we do that, all sorts of things start to open up for people. Emotions move, confidence comes back, their ability to respond to their environment, their recovery. So their sleep, their sex, like all sorts of stuff is really affected by how much coherence we have in our midline. So from our palate to our pelvic floor, and our digestion, our fluid flow, lymph flow, and the escort of metabolic waste out of the body, all of it's affected by pressures. And so everybody gets that. I don't care who comes to me. It's like, you don't think it's sexy. I don't care. That's what we're doing. And, so yeah, I think it's a lot of people that come to me that are afraid to move, that have been in chronic pain. And almost always across the board, it's a collapse structure that's not held up from that internal buoyancy. So in my opinion, there's a couple aspects to posture. It's like we have the outer like retensioning of the body, like the manipulation of the surface, like structure of the body that gives us structure, and then there's the internal buoyancy that we have from a robust, well-pressurized torso that through practice becomes autonomic, and we can start to regulate and maintain some pressure so that we actually walk around feeling a little bit like chest out, which just translates to confidence, which translates to openness, which translates to curiosity, but also like a certain power. So it's like, you're not naive. It's not this naive opening to all the energies. It's like, you're really centered, because you're working on your midline, like the most core of your body, but you're also open and at ease, so you can take in your environment. And so I'm hugely bullish on that, especially after it. Like, yeah, I just feel like it changed my training completely. Now, like, I don't warm up. I can go and just pick up a heavy sandbag or something, and my body's learning to just know how to engage on the fly for whatever I need. And I'm not holding tension the same way I used to, because I think my nervous system's regulated. And yeah, and so people are in a lot of pain. I get, it's insane. Like, I get thousands of messages and people are struggling. Like, they're just, I mean, it's hard enough to be totally sound of mind and body and have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, with the absolute presence and soundness of mind and body, it's still really challenging to be in a nuclear family, to not have support of your village, to not be connected to your landscape, to have to go to a 9 to 5, to have to be inside all day. And so throw on top of that chronic pain, like throw on top of that, like pain to where you can't tie your shoes, or like, it's just really hard. Like, people are really struggling. And so most people are in pain, like I'm not the like biggest, strongest, baddest dude on the internet. There's plenty of guys like that who I think maybe like the elite lifters go to, but I'm really here for like the average Joe, and Jane. I'm hoping to like make accessible, like, cause it's not complicated once you just know it, which is why I also feel like, why are people charging so much money to teach people? Like it's this illusion. It's a total facade. And I really want to buck against it. And because I care about the people, man, I want the people to get better so that we can turn the ship around. And it's not complicated once you know it, but yeah, there's definitely safe ways to re-engage with resistance training and internal pressure practice and stuff like that, so that people can like get back to putting on some muscle and feeling confident and getting out of pain. People get out of pain. I've been getting a lot of people out of pain, and that's just feels so great. And people feeling connected to themselves and their environment, which I think is even more important.
Yeah, I think, well, I guess it's know your audience. Who are you trying to attract? What are the goals that you have for the world around you? What is the change you're trying to affect? And with a lot of these gatekeepers and the weightlifters, the coaches, they might be attracting a client who wants the aesthetic, like they want the big muscles, they
Mm-hmm.
want that. What you and I don't know enough. I don't know who you're attracting, but I know who I am, and that I was attracted to what you were doing. Uh, I wanted to feel more grounded. I could see the way that you moved in your environment, which was the outdoors, the way that you were training in your environment, and it was exactly what you described, which was upright, aware of your surroundings. You could see your head constantly scanning, but not necessarily focusing on a specific thing. You're doing all these like rotational movements, the lunges, and you have a confidence, you have an energy that comes to the screen, and you could tell that this is a person who's very comfortable in his skin, is very comfortable moving, very comfortable in the outdoors doing this movement. And I can imagine that there's a lot of folks out there who see that and go, yeah, that's how I want to live. Because the other thing that dawned on me as I took in what you were doing is, in this journey that Mike and I have been on, this health odyssey, this podcast, we start to accumulate all these habits that we want to stack. And
Yeah.
grounding was an early one. Getting outside barefoot
Yeah.
was an early one.
Mm-hmm.
Getting sunshine was also another one. Get sun in your
Yeah.
eyes, get sun on your skin as much as you can. And I like to train. I like to work out. And I've always, I go to a gym because they have the equipment. I've
Yeah.
built a little garage, like a home gym in my garage, but I'm indoors and the gym is indoors and I'm under lights. And I see you and I go, wait a minute, I have all the same gear in my home gym. I'll just move it out to the deck and now I'll work out on the grass doing all the similar stuff that I had been doing, and then
Mm-hmm.
incorporating yours. And in that, now I'm checking these boxes and I'm not having to take up as much time. I'm on the ground, I'm in the sun, I'm getting my training in, and it felt like this was a much more efficient use of my time, and I could
Yeah.
stack habits right on top of each other.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um, So I want to talk really quickly before we wrap. I want to talk about getting out of pain and how you approach like the brain's perception of pain and how you address that with your clients. Like, is there an approach or a systemic approach that you take to helping maybe like rewire your clients' perception of pain in their bodies?
Yeah, and I think it's pretty relevant to you guys too, because I know that you hold this perspective as people who are, what do you call it, terrainists,
So yeah,
just
sure.
people who, people
Terrain camp.
people who care about the terrain, right, and who value the terrain. It's the same thing, right? Like I think pain is feedback. Like symptoms are healing. Same thing. Like,
Yeah.
and so it's like learning, but this has to happen like through, we have to be able to be under pressure, feel pain, and learn to be at ease with it and be okay. Like, and be like, oh, I'm in pain. Like, this is me healing. This is me getting feedback. This is good. Like, it's all, if as the more that we can down regulate the nervous system, the more that we can adopt the understanding that like the universe is actually always conspiring for equilibrium, always conspiring to come back to center, to healing. Then we can actually like work with the pain. And like, I think people are in pain for different reasons, right? Like, so I'll give you a story about myself, because I think resolution of pain can happen from a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach. And I'll explain what that means. It's, when I first started, I left the scene, I left the toxic crowd I was in, and fasting and getting into practice and all this stuff. And I loved practice, but I couldn't sit on the ground with my legs just folded. I couldn't sit like that comfortably. I had so much pain in my hips. They were literally locked up. Like I couldn't sit. I had to sit on a bunch of pillows or just sit in a chair. And that was discouraging for me, because I was like, I'm not a yogi. I can't even sit on the ground. And one night in my practice, I had the visceral, direct experience that everything that had happened in my life up until this point couldn't have happened any other way, and was essentially perfect amidst whatever chaos and whatever pain. It simply was. And that allowed me to forgive my father, who I caught cheating on my mom with when I was like 18 years old. He was cheating on my mom with someone, and I caught him. And I had this absolute, pure, total forgiveness for my father in that moment. And I got up from my sit, and I went and told him, it wasn't even like I was just moved to do it. And I went and I told him, and I said, I looked him right in the eyes. He was laying on his bed, and I said, Dad, I love you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And he was just like, what? And I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning to do my practice, and my legs went, and I had full mobility in my hips. I am not joking with you guys. Like, I had so much trauma stored in my hips, so much resentment and anger towards my father. And the truth is that my father was a little boy at once. He was just shaped by his environment. He was abused by his father. He was dealt the cards he was dealt, and he didn't pick it. And so it's like I had the direct experience of being able just to see that, like, we can point the finger back for eternity. And the truth is that, like, it's unfolding, it's gotten chaotic, but the universe is finding itself constantly. And so that was a miraculous healing that I had, and a complete resolution of pain in my hips. So that would be a top-down approach, right? Like, we could come to a realization in consciousness and experience that resolution in our tissues. And then I think some people, like, for instance, when I get someone underneath a sandbag doing deep pressure therapy, which is a practice I do, it's part of the nervous system stuff I teach. That's them getting directly into their tissues and, like, opening up their heart, so to speak, opening up their chest, expanding their rib cage, like distributing pressure on the inside of their body. And that's opening things up. And then from there, emotions might come. Some people start weeping. Some people start laughing crazily underneath the sandbag. It's like all sorts of stuff opens up from just getting into the tissues. And so I'm always like, well, let's burn the candle from both ends. So when I coach people, if it's one-on-one, I'm like, get under your sandbag, retension your body, get strong, and talk to me about your father. Talk to me about your mother. I want to know about your childhood. I want to know about your dreams or your losses. Talk to me about your grandparents. Talk to me about your pain. And so it's like, and I'm always encouraging people to find some form of mindfulness practice so that they can actually find the separation between being awake and aware and their thinking mind. And I think so much healing can come from there, especially in just the ability to finally start listening to people in the world in a way where we're not just waiting to talk or anything like that. We're actually just able to sit and receive. And like some of these men's retreats I'm involved in, when we have counsel and men get to share in confidentiality and around a fire, it's like, and we're teaching them to practice deep listening with your whole body and putting your whole agenda aside. Don't worry, you'll get to speak, and you'll speak spontaneously and potently, and just wait, just listen fully. Give this man the power of witness right now. And just the amount of healing that comes from that, where you just get to be like men who might have had something to say or had this thing come up. There's so much resolution that happens in the circle in men just because they're like listening and being able to have that mirror and reflection. They get to heal, and everybody's healing like all around just from being. It's not even about advice. We're not even giving advice in those retreats. We're not there to give advice. It's just there to be authentic, share from the heart, listen from the heart. And you just be amazed how people just heal. It's just out in the wilderness, so stack it all.
Yeah. Yeah, remarkable. You're a father. You said you've got 3 kids. We're all males, and as you noted, coming up in this world, we really, as males, don't have rites of passage. That's just missing. We're orphans, as you mentioned. As you're raising boys, what are you thinking about introducing those rites of passage to your boys, and what are
Yeah,
they?
well, Quill just turned 7, which is a big shift. Basically out of his littleness and into like a more of an older kid. And so we set him up with so we live out in the woods, but we set him up with an overnight camp by himself within earshot. And it was one of the most amazing experiences ever. So he's got like a flint and steel. He can start fires like that on his own. He knows plants. He knows how to make tea and herbal medicines and stuff like this to some degree. And so he got a tent for his birthday. We kind of like his birthday gifts were like the gear for his overnight. And so yeah, we walked him out there into this spot that he picked. He started his own fire from scratch, and we left him there. We left him there on his fire, and there happened to be this like kind of small skills gathering that was happening on the land at that time. All his friends were there, which was another big moment for him to be like, I'm actually not going to be at this with my friends. I'm actually going to go and be by myself in my spot. And so my wife is taking a piss like in the bush somewhere relatively close to where he's at, down over the hill by the creek. And he's like, Mom, my water filter's not working. He had a water filter and he was pumping water from the creek to drink it and make tea. It wasn't working. And so she was like, all right, I'll come down. But then she grabbed me and she grabbed Travis, who is his dad. So the 2 older boys are not my biological kids, just Angus, our youngest is. But we're very close with Travis. He lives on the land part-time and we all co-parent in a good way. And so we went down together, the 3 of us parents, and went and sat with him. And he had made tea. He had gone and collected fir tips and nettles, and he had made tea. And we sat in a circle around the fire with him, and he just handed the tea to us. He didn't even drink it. And as it went to each of us parents, we got to just sit there and share just some potent stuff with him about how much we loved him and how much we appreciated him and how proud of him we were. And you should have just seen him. He was just so upright and just like taking it all in. And he's a magical kid. And then we shared our tea. He eventually had a little bit after. It was kind of like we put our prayers into the tea and he drank it. And then we said, all right, Quilly, we're going to go now. And so we left, and he spent the night by himself. And then at like 9 a.m, he showed up. He had packed his entire camp down and brought all his stuff back. And that seemed like an age appropriate thing for him based on his skill level too. And, I think this is a good thing to talk about real quick, is that like we're cultural orphans, right? And I think that sometimes creating ritual and creating rites of passage can feel like it doesn't feel authentic or something, because we're not coming from a tradition. So it feels like kind of like we're like, this doesn't feel authentic. Like I don't want to do it. And we can like steer away from it. But I want to say that like it takes a lot of courage to create tradition and create ritual for ourselves and for our kids in light of not having adopted it. And I want to champion that. I want us to step towards that, even though it feels a little inauthentic, even though it feels a little uncomfortable, and you might be stumbling, you might not know the most potent words to say or how it's all going to unfold, but just that intention to do that. And like we do that with all the young women out there who get their first bleed and are coming of age. All the women, or the women in our small intimate community, they take them and they have this beautiful event. And like every time they do it, it gets a little more refined, a little more coherent, and it's always magical. It doesn't matter. It's just the intent. It just will happen. And so I want to encourage parents to bring that sacred moment to these turning points in their kids' lives, even if you didn't have it. And I want to encourage parents to go get initiated in some way. Put yourself through something like that. Find someone who you trust who has experience doing a vision fast. Go fast in the wilderness for a bit. Go on retreat. Go have a little solitary time. Find a way to tap into the bigger picture and to push yourself into something so that you can be forged a bit.
Are your other children, were they old enough to sort of take in that ceremony and what was going on for their older sibling, and have that sense of like, oh my gosh, I can't wait till I'm old enough to get to go through that ceremony?
Yeah, I'm not in that specific moment. Like, I think Addie he was just engrossed with all the kids in the play. It was like a little mini
Yeah,
skills gathering. There were puppets
yeah.
being made and people were making spoons, like tanning hides and all this stuff. So he was like not even really. Quill was like just fully in it. And, but the kids are mirroring Quill all the time, man, and mirroring me. Like, it's amazing to see. Like Angus right now, because we're making friction fire like every day right now. Because I'm with my nephew here, who's 14 years old. Who, let's talk about, like, he's 14 years old. He just went on a 3-day walkabout by himself out in the wilderness in the refuge. He took a paracord, a pot, a knife, and a wool blanket. And that's all he took. No food, no water. The first night we had a crazy thunderstorm, like lightning, thunder, torrential downpour. And he's the son of my little brother, my baby brother, my little brother. He's big now. And Kev's like, I got to go check on him. He knew where his debris hut was that he had built. And so he's like, I got to go check and just make sure he's okay. Gets over there. Keahi, my nephew, had managed to build his own bow drill kit out of all the stuff that was there. He didn't take a kit. He had started a fire amidst the storm. He was snoring in his debris hut with a little fire going. You saw his pot that had like plantain and other wild edibles he had found to make tea. And you saw the cattails from where he was making cattail flour for him to like eat pancakes the next morning. And I'm like, these kids are insane. Like, if you just put them in the environment, but now Angus sees me and Keahi working different combinations of woods on friction fire every day. And so now all Angus wants to do is go get the fireboard and try and put the stick in. Angus is 1.5, he's like this tiny, tiny man. And he's actually gets it in there and starts spinning it. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, I just feel so good. So yeah.
That's remarkable. You're living something of a dream, I gotta say. I tip my hat.
I do feel really, really grateful. I do my best to not take any of it for granted.
Yeah, it shows and it comes through. Tim, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I really appreciate all that you've shared so far, and really can't wait for the listener to do a deeper dive into what you have to offer. But I want to bring it around towards the landing of this episode here and ask you a question that we ask all our guests. And that is, what are your non-negotiables, the daily habits that you do to tend to your terrain?
Movement is a non-negotiable for me. For my mental health, my physical capability, I have to be cultivating myself physically in some way every day. Yeah, one of the things that I just, I'm hardcore idealistic, like probably like you guys on some level, as you get into this stuff, I'm like, I will not drink out of plastic bottles. I will only drink clean water. I would rather not drink I'd rather drink no water than drink shit water. So like that, food, non-negotiables, I stick to. Like, I do not put toxic chemicals in my body. Like I do my best to limit toxicity as the best I can. And, I'm covered in tattoos, and there's a lot of debate on whether I'm going to die next year or something from my tattoos or what. But like, let me tell you something. I rarely get sick. I mean, I'll maybe get sick like once every 3 years. Like, I'm doing good. And, it's because I think I tend to like, maybe this is not getting into my lymph. Maybe it's not actually poisoning me. Maybe it's actually not that bad. I don't know. We'll see. Nonetheless, I got to do what I got to do. And all the practices remain. I make sure that I'm not putting toxic stuff in my body. I make sure I'm moving my blood and my lymph and contracting my tissues, and giving gratitude. praying and giving gratitude, like just giving thanks for this miraculous life. I think that plus just the simple things like going outside and getting my bare feet on the ground as much as I can, as much sunlight as is reasonable. And then it's quality time with my family and my people, like where we're connecting in the ways that really matter to me, and cultivating that intimacy with each other and the planet. Those are it's really simple, but those are the things. Yeah.
Tim, where can the listener learn more about you and all the services that you provide?
Yeah. If you go to timmatz.com, TIMMATZ, that's my name, Tim Matz. You'll see there people can grab that free morning. I have a free morning movement routine, which is designed to get you out into the first light of the day, mobilize your joints, get the lymph moving, really assess and just tune in with your body, which I think is like where it all begins. And it's a very easy, approachable practice that like you can commit to something like that. Everybody can commit to 5 to 20 minutes and all the effects of grounding and getting that circadian rhythm set. So that practice is free. There's also a membership platform where I try to provide as much value as I can. It's only $10 a month. I do 3 live trainings a week in there, a live coaching call. I've got tons of tutorials on there, a really cool growing community. And I also coach people one-on-one, but ultimately, like people want to coach one-on-one. I'm like, you should just probably go into this. It's even more affordable. And I'm in there just as much. And so I'm really doing my best to just like, yeah, if people believe in what I'm doing and want to support me, that's a great way to support me. It's $10 a month. And I'm continuing to grow that into something that, just meets the needs of the average person so that we can turn this ship around. So yeah, timmatz.com. You can find me at Move Like Human too on Instagram.
That's where I found you. All right. We'll put the links in the show notes. Tim Matz, thank you so much for joining us on the Terrain Theory podcast. It has been a pleasure.
I want to thank you guys. I love your podcast. I think that you're doing heroic work and I've learned so much, and there's such amazing people that you've brought on. And I just, it's a courageous path that you're both walking. And I just want to say that I really see you and appreciate you and want to thank you for everything that you're doing in this on this ship that we share together.
Appreciate you. Right back
Thank
at
you,
you,
brother.
Tim.
And it's the after party in the Pineal Room with Mike and Ben. How you doing, Benjamin?
I'm well. How are you? I wish I was outside.
Yeah, well, it's a little rainy here, but still, that's something I've kind of embraced, getting out in the rain.
Yeah, it was. It's fun because yesterday you weren't able to be on it, but yesterday was the interview with Gaetan Chevalier, who's the director of the Earthing Institute, and there's obviously great overlap between everything that they're doing at the Earthing Institute and the practices, the integration of those findings and research by folks like Tim Matz. And one of them that I learned from Gaetan is the minimum effective dose is 20 minutes. You want to be out, feet on the ground for 20 minutes unbroken. It's not like you try to accumulate throughout the day. You got to go 20 minutes unbroken. And that's sort of changed my approach, because I have done some mornings where I'll go out barefoot, but it might be like 10 minutes, because like I can feel the pressures of the day already.
Yeah.
And now I'll have the timer, to make sure. But when you're doing a workout like Tim recommends, that's 45 50 minutes, like you've got no problem accumulating that grounding time.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. And you sir should be playing pickup baseball barefoot.
I do.
Oh, well then, okay, shame on me for suggesting you weren't. Of course you are.
Yeah, maybe not every day, but mostly I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. Does everyone play barefoot?
No.
That's so like old school, isn't it?
Yeah, baseball
like
is the
old
best.
timey pickup baseball barefoot.
It's funny. I don't think they're. This is actually interesting. There's a old timey baseball men's league, or men's and women's. I think it's co-ed. And there's a team in Kingston called the Kingston Guards that I'm getting some peer pressure to sign up with. And they're so old school. They use like a specific rule book from the 1800s, and they're not barefoot, but they don't use gloves. It's barehanded. Wow. Maybe I told you about this.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a deal breaker for me as a musician who's a little bit precious about his hands. But I just saw my friend Max, who's on the team this week, and he's having a blast, and he's like, we really need you. We really need you. So maybe I'll go for it.
Yeah, I suppose like trying to be an outfielder and catch a, pop fly with your bare hands. You
Well,
are.
part of the rules is you can catch it on a bounce, and that's an out.
Oh, okay.
I think the hardest part would be being a catcher or a
Sure.
first baseman. You
Sure.
know,
Because
yeah,
those are just
or
flying
really
at
just an
you.
infielder in general. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. What were your thoughts on Tim?
I wish I had spent more time, following his Insta and stuff, because I was sort of going in blind, which I don't mind. I like going in blind, but I feel like I would have got more out of the my end of the conversation. Was I was a little bit more prepared, because he's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I don't, it doesn't, it feels like we've touched on this before, rites of passage
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah,
kids, but
yeah,
he feels like the type of well, first of all, it seems like he's already doing it. They're doing it. They're doing it out there in their intentional community, their shared land out there with their families. He's doing it with his son, so he's already on his way.
yeah,
It's a matter of like codifying it on a wide scale basis. And I think you do have some of these, call them like private schools or charter schools or camps for kids that are trying to do that, start to do like rites of passage and impart some of these life skills and these wisdoms, life skills not to survive in the modern world, but life skills to survive in the wilderness
yeah,
and reconnect with nature. And it's how do we do this now on like a mass level? And if our education system was worth anything, we'd have done it in middle school.
yeah.
That'd have been part of elementary school and middle school. Do you remember learning how to light a fire in elementary school?
No, but we didn't we all go to something called environmental camp in 5th grade?
There was that, yeah, like the overnight camp.
Yeah, and it's kind of a step in that direction, where it's kind of like what the Ashokan Center is. I mean, they do environmental ed for kids that get them out of the city and into the woods, but this is the next level where you're learning some of those skills, and then to take a step further, you're alone, for maybe an overnight with those learned skills. Hold on a second. What's up, Willie? You going to work? All right, I'll be right behind you.
He's like 2 for 2 on coming in during after
I know.
parties.
It's
He's
very
just he's you know what he's doing? He's just bragging about how he can drive himself to work.
yeah, he just wants everyone to know.
Yeah. Wait for the. You'll hear me. You'll hear me turn on my car. But yes, there was that, but the environmental camp really should be like the test, right? The
Correct.
skills should be
right,
taught all
right,
throughout the school year.
right,
It shouldn't be this condensed 5-day thing where
right.
you think you're going to retain all this. No, that like this should be part of every day, is learning, one, being out in nature, intimately out in nature for a sustained amount of time, and then really learning about nature and survival in nature. And that's
Yeah,
just missing. That's just not there,
absolutely.
you know? And it has me thinking a lot about where, where I have been doing this with Grayson, and also more where I haven't. And I think about it like, Grayson's 7 years old. Would he feel comfortable going out, putting up his own tent? I don't think he's there. So
Right.
I'm behind and he's behind. But conversations like this with Tim remind me like, okay, we got to prioritize this.
Yeah. I also found myself wondering about the chronic issue I have between my shoulder blades that I blame on a repetitive stress industry from injury from guitar. But I wonder how much of that is emotional too. When he told that story about his dad, and then it's just like
Yeah.
his hips just released, got me thinking about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Who do you have to forgive, Michael, in your
Right.
life?
Correct.
You know,
Right.
who could you possibly have to forgive? I don't know how many people have wronged you. I don't think many people have wronged MJR. How would they dare? You've not.
Exactly. I'll do some soul searching on that one. But
Yeah.
I was also going to say, I feel like Tim would be a good person. This would be a good episode to recommend to certain people as like a gateway into our podcast,
Sure.
because not all of this stuff is for everybody, at least or where they're at, in their journey. But I like that he really sort of hammered on the idea that just getting your physical body in tune is a great first step to a much greater wellness. And to say it out loud seems a little obvious at first, but it's not. It is the low hanging fruit, right? And it's, ultimately we're after mind, body, spirit in everybody's own time on their own path. But there's something non-polarizing about just getting the movement piece dialed in, I think.
I agree. And you're living in it all day.
Yeah.
You can find time. Everybody absolutely can find 20 to 30 minutes in their day.
Yeah.
To go outside and do some of this movement stuff. You don't need a ton of gear. Like one of the things I think I saw him do and it inspired me to do was I just went into the woods and found a rock. I don't even know how heavy it is.
Yeah.
It feels like 30 pounds, maybe 35, 40 pounds. And you can hold that rock and do like lunges and do rotations. And then I've started like chucking it over my shoulder.
Yeah.
And then I'll walk over and get it and I'll chuck it over the other shoulder, or like rotate and toss it over my shoulder. Just that's all you can find a rock in the woods, and that can serve as your weight to provide a little bit of resistance, and you're good.
Yeah, it's a little bit that Tommy John school of like,
it is.
You could hire a moving truck, or you could just fucking carry your bookshelf through town to your new apartment.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. No, and Tommy John's a great example. He does not let opportunity go. Every opportunity he has, like, fills the gas. He's filling the gas. He's going to do lunges, or he's going to do like calf raises. There's always opportunity to work in some movement into your day.
Exactly.
We just need to, it's creating the habit. It's wiring the brain and creating the habit.
Yeah. And not spending all those, all that quote unquote downtime on our phones scrolling.
Correct.
So most people are doing, and I'm guilty of it too. I mean, we all are.
Same.
Yeah.
The other point that he made, which was relevant because we've talked about this openly, but that he keeps his inner practice to himself.
Yeah, I respect that.
I respect that too, and it does have me thinking back to some of the conversations we've had in the after party recently. I don't even know if those have been live yet. Some of them in the can, where maybe I'm getting a little boastful about some of the inner practice that I've done and how it makes me feel. Maybe and I'll hold it in check now moving forward. But I think at the time it was like, part of what we do is we do this work and then share it. We love sharing the results of it with the people and say, hey, it is working for me. Maybe it'll work for you. Give it a whirl. And I don't want to temper all of that, and I don't want to withhold all of it. But there is something about being selective, perhaps, and just quietly going about it and being unassuming, as he said.
Yeah.
Quietly confident and not so boastful about, I meditated 30 minutes today. What did you do? Not that, I would do that, but
right.
Point.
There is a weird like stigma, and like, again, because we're cultural orphans. I love that phrase that he used, but like this just queasiness around even the word spirituality, or like this guru complex. When you just taking one step down that road, people really get their hackles up. There's a tension around it,
Yeah.
In the Western world, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still struggle to figure out how to broach the subject with certain people, but I like his approach. Just maybe don't. Maybe let it be.
Yeah, I was thinking as we were in conversation that it would be amazing to do a chat, a conversation, an episode with him and Marlon Azurdia.
Yeah.
There's a lot of overlap, and Marlon seems so steeped in a lot of Eastern traditions and readings and philosophies, and he's allowed that to shape his practice, his physical practice and movement practice. I bet those two would get on pretty well and have a lot to chat about.
Yeah. But not Tommy John, because he doesn't do podcasts anymore.
Tommy John does not do podcasts anymore, apparently. No. Although, maybe too. I think there'd be a lot that they could all learn from one another. That'd be a riot. That would be a riot.
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of interested to get a little deeper into Tim's world. Like, I could use, as much as I love my hockey ritual and my pickup baseball and even my morning ritual, I could use, I think, a mentor in that space to really help me have a little bit more discipline. I think it might be good for me.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna join. $10. $10 a month is not that much. And I've canceled like almost all of my stupid subscriptions to like streaming services. I don't even know what I have left.
Right.
And I can put, just so that it could like feel good about putting it into things like this, a membership, learning opportunities, courses and stuff. And this one, I get so inspired by, he's constantly putting up content on social of him just doing what he does, like doing his thing, his practice outside. And it's not what you see. It's just not what you see. Everyone else is in a gym and they're, muscle, bodybuilders and building muscle and like peddling some supplement or something. And
Yeah.
he's so different. It's just like, no, I want to move pain-free in my environment, in my body. And there's something that really resonates. So I want to support him and I want to learn more. And hopefully some folks out there will go follow him and maybe get something from all that he's sharing with the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, folks, nothing you heard here should be taken as medical advice, as neither Mike nor I are medical experts. Remember that you are light, you are love, and you are your primary healthcare provider. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we will catch you on the next one.